Well, how you doing? Good seeing you. This is Christians in a Cancel Culture. It's a podcast where we talk about how we can talk about what cancel culture often does not want us to talk about. Well, conversion therapy is back in the news. What's that? Good question. I'm not sure I know anymore. It's one of those words that keeps morphing. So once you think you've tracked it down, it squirms away from you. I'm reminded of what Humpty Dumpty said to Alice in Lewis Carroll's book Alice in Wonderland. When I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, nothing more nor less. Kind of hard to have much of a discussion when someone keeps changing the meaning of terms on you, but that's definitely what's happened when we talk about conversion therapy. What is it? Originally, conversion therapy referred to something which was also called reparative therapy. That was a clinically analytic treatment to approach to homosexuality. Reparative therapy, which was later called conversion therapy, was a psychoanalytic approach to the treatment of homosexuality, and it was marked primarily by origins and outcomes. Reparative therapy believed that homosexuality came from certain family origins, certain dynamics that had both conscious and subconscious effects on the individual, which created homosexuality. And the outcome of reparative therapy was a change in sexual orientation. So, reparative therapy, which was then renamed conversion therapy, initially meant a psychoanalytic clinical approach to homosexuality. Then it morphed. It started becoming applied to any kind of specialized ministry to people who said, hey, I realize I'm gay. I also realize this is not what God intended. I want to live a life within the parameters of my belief system. Can you help me? And any ministry or counselor or coach, life coach, whatever, who helped such a person was now called a conversion therapist. Now it's morphed even more broadly to mean any form of pastoral counseling, discipleship, teaching, any instruction which takes a traditionally biblical viewpoint of homosexuality and seeks to help people who identify themselves as attracted to the same sex to live their lives obediently, promising no change in their sexual feelings, but certainly allowing that such a change can happen, because we don't try to limit the power of God, nor do we put demands on the power of God. We simply say we can help you to live an obedient life and to be a faithful follower of Christ. That faithfulness will be extended to your sexuality. Well, now even that is referred to as conversion therapy. So basically, if you are in any way expressing the belief that homosexuality falls short of God's will and that people can be freed from the power of that sin and live lives in obedience to the faith, you are now practicing conversion therapy. Well, gosh, it's been banned in other countries. Canada just passed a ban on it earlier this year. New Zealand has passed a national ban on it. Other nations have as well. And in the United States, why there are both cities and states and municipalities that have banned conversion therapy for teenagers. So far, at least as of the time we are recording this podcast, no ban has been placed on so-called conversion therapy for adults, but definitely it has become literally illegal to offer counsel to teenagers who struggle with their sexuality if your counsel is coming from a traditional biblical perspective. Now, President Biden pledged to ban conversion therapy when he ran for office. Now, recently, in honor of Pride Month in America, he has reiterated his commitment to banning this practice. Here's a description of his plan taken from the White House Government Briefing Room website. It says, and I quote, President Biden is also encouraging the Federal Trade Commission to consider whether the practice, conversion therapy, constitutes an unfair or deceptive act or practice, and whether to issue consumer warnings or notices. And he is directing the Secretaries of State, Treasury, and HHS to develop an action plan to promote an end to so-called conversion therapy around the world. Wow, that's ambitious. Actually planning to ban conversion therapy worldwide, meaning, of course, he would have to silence the Christian voice, whether it's coming from the pulpit or from the counselor's office or the life coach training office or whatever, an end to anybody saying, if you're gay and you believe that that falls short of God's will for your life, as the scripture says it does, then we are here to help you to change that behavior and to seek to live a sanctified life. You're going to get banned. It's pretty serious ambition. It's a pretty serious charge, by the way, to say something is damaging. Now, look, if something is really damaging gay and lesbian people, well, yeah, I hope we're against it. We should be. Something's damaging anybody, I hope we're against it, okay? But the burden of proof is on the accuser, not the accused. If somebody is going to say this is damaging to people, you have to offer verifiable evidence that it is damaging to people. And for that reason, I say the claim of harm is bogus. The claim that so-called conversion therapy is damaging is bogus for three particular reasons. I want to go over each one of those with you today. First, conversion therapy is a linguistic shell game. Now, that's an important point. Conversion therapy is a linguistic shell game. That is to say, when you play the shell game, you've probably seen this before. You take three shells. You put a little ball under one of the shells, then you sort of mix the shells up and you say, okay, you guess which one it's under, okay? That's the shell game. Guess which one it's under. It looks like it's under here, but really it's under here. Now, a linguistic shell game is when you say, okay, this is a word. Now, you look for the meaning of the word under these shells. So, for example, let's take the word racism. That's another one that the linguistic shell game has been played with. Racism, it used to mean a belief in the superiority of one race over another. Pretty simple. Okay, it's under that shell. So you go, okay, it's there. Nope, sorry. It's not there anymore, because now racism doesn't just mean a belief in the superiority of one race over another. It also means that if you're of the dominant race, you are now also racist. And you go, oh, okay, so that's what it means. It's under that shell. Nope, sorry, it doesn't mean that anymore. Now it means if you don't accept critical race theory, you are a racist. See, the meaning keeps getting morphed. The shells keep getting mixed up, and you go, I don't know where to find it anymore. The same is true of the word homophobia. It used to mean an irrational fear, dread, or hatred of homosexual people. It's under that shell. That's where you find the meaning. Okay, no problem. There it is. Nope, sorry. Now homophobia means if you disagree with someone who embraces homosexuality, or if you, from a biblical perspective, disapprove of homosexuality, now it's under that shell. See, the meaning keeps morphing. So basically, you got a linguistic shell game going on here. Now, the same is true with the term conversion therapy. It's a linguistic shell game. It basically says, okay, conversion therapy is bad. Okay, what does conversion therapy mean? Well, it means this. Okay, I'll look for it under that shell. Well, now it also means this. Now it also means this. So basically the idea is to make certain that anyone who does not validate homosexuality is guilty of somehow promoting conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is made out to mean one thing. It's made out to mean something sinister, some form of treatment in which either a licensed professional therapist, clinician, or perhaps a medical doctor, or perhaps a ministry leader does something bizarre to someone who says, hey, I have same-sex attractions. The doctor applies shock treatment and electrodes to the person. The therapist does some bizarre sort of technique to get the person to completely change his sexual feelings. And he tells you, if you come to me, I'll completely transform you from a homosexual into a heterosexual. Or the person who prays for someone who is homosexual does something bizarre, like I'm going to cast the demon out of you, and I'm going to make you fast and pray and vomit and do all sorts of weird things. And you look at those excessive, strange behaviors and you go, okay, that's conversion therapy. Well, if you're passing a ban on that kind of thing, I support you, because that kind of behavior is weird. And you say, well, yes, okay, that is weird, and I support you banning that kind of behavior. Then you read the fine print and you find out, whoa, wait a minute. What am I signing up for here? Your ban does not just forbid that. It even forbids anybody helping counsel someone to change the expression of themselves sexually if they are homosexual. In other words, all bans on conversion therapy, and this is true, by the way, all bans on conversion therapy include the phrase that conversion therapy is any form of counsel or ministry or treatment which seeks to help someone change their expression of homosexual desire. Now, wait a minute. That means literally, if I am counseling a married man who is also attracted to men, but he has a wife and children at home. And that married man comes to me and says, Joe, I have homosexual desires. I am giving into those desires. I want to stop giving into them. Help me stop giving into them. I'm hooking up with other men anonymously and I'm looking at gay porn and I want to stop. I would have to say, no, I can't help you if I lived in a country which banned so-called conversion therapy, because I would be helping him change the expression of his homosexual desire. And that is exactly what conversion therapy bans. So basically, what you're seeing here is the linguistic shell game. It tells you that you're banning one thing, but you're really banning something else entirely. That's one reason these claims about the damage of so-called conversion therapy are bogus. Another reason, of course, is that counseling is not consumer fraud. How do you define consumer fraud? The definition of consumer fraud technically is, quote, deceptive business practices that cause consumers to suffer financial or other losses. Deceptive business practices that cause consumers to suffer financial or other losses. How does that play out? Well, basically, the victim of consumer fraud believes that he or she is participating in a valid business transaction, but they're actually being defrauded. That's one form of consumer fraud. Sort of like, hey, I got a bridge to sell you. Look at that bridge. You want to buy it? Okay, I'll take $500 from you right now. Such a deal. There, I got your money. Thank you. Well, you thought you were engaging in a legitimate business practice, but you weren't. I just ripped you off. That's consumer fraud. Or another form of consumer fraud, which they try to apply to so-called conversion therapy, is the fraud of someone making false promises or inaccurate claims. And thereby they cheat consumers out of their money. For example, if I say, I've got the cure for baldness. Well, trust me, if I had the cure for baldness, I wouldn't look the way I look. But if I were to say, I got the cure for baldness, send me $1,000 and I'll send you Dr. Joe's Miracle Elixir and you're going to have hair all over your body. So you shell out $1,000 and I send you some tap water and you sprinkle it on and nothing happens. That was consumer fraud. Why? Because I made false promises. I made inaccurate claims. Now, I'll be the first to say, if a person were to say, hey, come to me and I will make all your homosexual desires go away, you'll never be tempted again, you're going to be completely transformed and you'll be aroused by the opposite sex. If I made that claim, I would say, well, that's a very irresponsible claim to make, and probably in many cases it will also be a fraudulent claim. Thereby, yeah, I could see how that would qualify as consumer fraud. But that's not what's happening. Okay, you look up the websites of anybody who does so-called conversion therapy. Now, first of all, you're not going to find anybody who advertises as someone who does conversion therapy, because that's a pejorative term. It's a linguistic slam. It's meant to discredit the individual, and nobody who counsels from a biblical perspective refers to themselves as a conversion therapist. Just like no person who prays for the sick calls himself a holy roller. You know, no person who counsels homosexuals calls himself a conversion therapist. But look up the websites of people who offer biblically based counseling and ministry to people who are attracted to the same sex. And you'll see that the claims on all of their websites are very cautious, very responsible, very biblically based. Nobody is saying, yes, we're going to, offer you some sort of hocus pocus that completely transforms your feelings. But yes, we will offer you biblically based guidelines by which to live and through which to experience the transforming power of God in your life. And like I said, and let me say this plainly, I don't believe that anybody should be forced to say, oh, no, it's impossible for your sexual feelings to change, any more than anybody should be forced to say, oh, it's impossible for God to heal you physically. I mean, if I prayed for somebody who was sick, I'm not going to promise them that they're going to be healed, but absolutely it's possible that they could be. And there are plenty of people, myself included, who absolutely have experienced changes in our sexual desires, whether it was the diminishing of the strength of the desires, the diminishing of the frequency of the desires, the transformation of the desires, whatever that may be. Now, does that happen because some people have a more flexible sexual makeup than other people? Possibly. Does that happen just because God sovereignly decides to deal with people in a certain way? Possibly. There's a lot about this we don't know. But what you can't do with any responsibility is predict the outcome for all people. And I think you'll find that anybody who does the kind of work that I do, that people who do so-called conversion therapy do, makes false promises or inaccurate claims about the outcome of coming for treatment or for counseling. And for that reason, no. I don't believe you can, with any integrity, lay an accusation of consumer fraud on anyone who does this kind of work. Another reason I believe these charges made by people who want to ban conversion therapy are bogus. These bans violate autonomy. They absolutely violate autonomy. Now, let's look at the context we're having this discussion in. I'm very aware, as you are, that Roe v. Wade was recently overturned. And a lot of people are now saying, well, hey, that Supreme Court decision has violated women's autonomy. I don't have bodily autonomy if I cannot make reproductive choices. And thereby, you guys can't scream about banning conversion therapy because you were very willing to ban bodily autonomy of women. Now, you're talking apples and oranges here. Bodily autonomy means just that, my body. And do I have the right to decide to do what I wish with my body? So long as I'm not harming another body, yeah. But if there's another body living inside an individual, then this isn't a case of bodily autonomy. There are two bodies involved, the body of the person who is carrying the child and the body of the child itself. And for that reason, you've got a very different situation here. This is autonomy that has to do with a person's own body, only with a person's own body, and without own person's free will and their worldview and their decision to make their behavior conform to their worldview. Now, you'll hear the argument, well, the federal government then is now essentially banning abortion, which is absolutely not true. Number one, the federal government is not doing that. The Supreme Court simply decided that the question of whether or not abortion is legal and available should be made by states, not by the federal government, and thereby it has returned the power to make that decision to the states. But as I said, bodily autonomy, that applies only to your own body. Back in 1984, I made a decision that had to do with bodily autonomy. That decision did not involve another person's body. It only involved my own. I had the right to make a decision as to what I would do with my own sexuality. I had the right, first of all, to ask for help, seeing that my behavior conformed to my worldview. Secondly, I had the right to explore whatever potential I had for heterosexual response with a responsible third party. Party, I should say. That was a case of bodily autonomy. That was my right. Finally, these bans negate inarguable outcomes. They really do. They negate inarguable outcomes. And let me explain that. You absolutely can change your sexual behavior. These bans say that you cannot. Thereby, they negate an inarguable outcome. If somebody comes to me and says, Joe, I am acting out sexually with other men, I want to stop that behavior. Is that possible? Absolutely, that is possible. And I will help you to do so because I believe that is what Scripture commends. And if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, I know that that is what he commands. So absolutely, I would help you to do that. Now, these bans say, no, no, no. That cannot happen when inarguably it can. Now, here's where it gets ironic. On the one hand, here we are in 2022 discussing making it illegal to counsel someone who wants to change their sexual behavior. On the other hand, we are talking about mandating it, that is, mandating the prerogative of children and teenagers to decide whether or not to literally change from one sex to another. Now, there are 2 points that are inarguable here. It is inarguable that you can change your behavior, and it's also inarguable that you cannot change your sex. Not really. I mean, you can reconfigure your body, but the fact is your DNA is absolutely going to stay the same. So here on the one hand, very high-ranking officials in our own governmental system are telling you that you can change from one sex to another when it is inarguable that the outcome is just the opposite. You really cannot. When, on the other hand, they are trying to tell you that you cannot stop homosexual behavior when, in fact, the outcome is inarguable. You absolutely can. It is inarguable that you cannot change your DNA. It is also inarguable that you can change your gender. Now, we could have an honest discussion as to whether or not someone should try to change their sexual behavior. I mean, I think that's a discussion that ought to be had. Should people try to go straight if they are gay? Should people turn from homosexual behavior? Yeah, I absolutely believe that they should. But I make that belief based on a certain worldview that I hold as a Bible-believing Christian, and I'm very willing to engage in a reasonable discussion with someone who holds a different worldview. But what is inarguable is that people can change their sexual behavior, and they absolutely can. Thereby, these bans are banning the inarguable outcome, the fact that somebody can, in fact, change their sexual behavior. And really, in that sense, I think these bans are a part of a much broader picture, aren't they? I mean, look at the context in all of this. A lot of people are arguing this, I think, just for the sake of winning their case. You know, attorneys try to win a case. They don't care about what's true. They care about winning the case. That's the way a lot of people are arguing this issue. They just basically want to silence any voice which questions whether or not homosexuality is normal or God ordained. And that is a part of a broader issue. A lot of people want to win this case for the sake of what they believe is a higher cause. What is that higher cause? The cause of dismantling the definition of the family, dismantling the concept of marriage as we know it, dismantling the concept of gender as we know it, dismantling the concept of national borders, dismantling the concept of national pride, dismantling the right to self-defense, dismantling the right to free speech. Let's not kid ourselves. The same broad crusade, which I often refer to as cancel culture, is committed to all of those forms of dismantling. This is only one of them. Because what is really happening here, and I hope you and I can grasp this, there is a commission we were given as followers of Jesus Christ, a mandate and a job description, really. He said, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. Light illuminates. Now, significant parts of the world are saying to the church, you may not be the light of the world. Significant parts of the culture are saying to the church what we may or may not call sin, what we may or may not call righteousness. Thereby, if the church abdicates her position as the light of the world and allows herself to be intimidated by elements like these conversion therapy bans, the church is thereby in serious danger of allowing the world to become the light of the church, rather than continuing as the church to be the light of the world. That is a pretty serious outcome. And that, to my thinking, makes this a hill to die on. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. If you have not yet subscribed to our page, I hope you do so. Just hit that bell there and let me know that you subscribed. Hey, I'd love to hear from you, by the way. Any feedback you've got, good, bad, or ugly, be glad to hear from you. You can write to us right here in the comments sections. And if you'd like to support this ministry so we can go on providing free content online, hey, just go to joedallas.com/giving. joedallas.com/giving, and that'll show you how you can partner with us in this work. Well, hey, we're here every Friday. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Meanwhile, let's keep in mind as we're addressing cancel culture and the broader challenge of being light in a very dark time, the job description Paul gave to Timothy when he was talking about anyone who wants to be a servant of the Lord. The servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle to all, apt to teach, patient in meekness, instructing those who oppose themselves, if perhaps God will grant them repentance according to the knowledge of the truth. 2 Timothy 2:24 and 25. Hey, let's keep this in mind when it comes to the truth. It is not just where you stand, it is also how you stand. Good being with you. God bless.